Story 1. When they try to offer you a salary that is lower than what they are advertising. For example, the job advertisement states $50,000 to $70,000, but they offer you $40,000. They attempt to justify this by saying you are not experienced enough. However, you are experienced enough and may even have more than enough experience. Story 2. Years ago, I had the worst job ever. I worked 80 hours a week for a narcissistic boss who delighted in pitting one employee against another. What I should have asked in the interview was, how did this position open up? I found out later that my predecessor had committed suicide at work. Story 3. As a human resources professional, I will provide you with the best list of warning signs to know when to leave a job. I have worked at Fortune 500 companies and small family-owned businesses. I have also worked with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and Labor Board commissions on both sides. I can tell you that whether it is a company focused on profit or a nonprofit organization, the issues are often the same. 1. They say, "We really like team players here." They plan to take advantage of you. 2. You are offered the job immediately with a start date the next day or the same day. This means no one else wanted to deal with the issues, and they just need bodies. 3. They do not post the job wage. They intend to pay less than what the position is worth. 4. They claim there is no flexibility in the budget for salary. This is usually a lie, relying on fear of confrontation. 5. They ask how much you are currently making before giving you an offer. They will lowball you. A company that does not value you from the start never will. 6. They say, "We are like a family here." This often means the environment is dysfunctional or abusive. 7. They misrepresent the job title or position available. This is often illegal and indicates a lack of integrity. 8. The interviewer, especially the hiring manager, is late to the interview. This suggests poor communication or lack of time for proper training and will lead to disorganization, though you will remain accountable. 9. They ask personal questions unrelated to the job, like what kind of music you enjoy. In phone interviews, these questions can be used to infer your race, which is potentially discriminatory. 10. They ask if you have a car. This is usually illegal unless directly related to the job. Cars can be a financial privilege which could lead to discrimination. Instead, answer that you have reliable transportation and, if pressed, affirm that you have always arrived on time. 11. They ask discriminatory or sexist questions. This should go without saying to avoid. 12. You are the only person of your gender in the workplace. This often creates a biased environment and the risk of unfair treatment. Complaints are frequently silenced in these boys or girls clubs. Both men and women in positions of authority can perpetuate this. 13. They inquire about your availability outside normal working hours when this was not mentioned in the job description. This may indicate an expectation of unpaid overtime. 14. They push back or withdraw the offer when you try to negotiate salary or benefits. If this happens, you have avoided a major problem. Employers who are not desperate usually welcome reasonable negotiation. 15. Interviewers or employees in the building appear depressed or uninterested. This is a strong indicator of the work environment you will face. 16. Check reviews on Glassdoor before the interview. Most reviews tend to be negative, but they provide useful information for questions during the interview. 17. Ask about the average employee tenure at the company. Employees rarely quit bad jobs. They quit bad management. 18. Ask about opportunities for promotion from within versus hiring external candidates. If management roles are always filled externally, promotion is unlikely and you may need to find another job if you want to advance. 19. Ask what the interviewer's favorite part of working at the company is. If the answer is only vacation time or benefits and not the workplace environment or job itself, this may indicate dissatisfaction. 20. More than 2 interviews for a non-high-paying position is usually a waste of time. Often, this means they are delaying for a preferred candidate. 21. Ask how many internal employees are applying for the position. This indicates internal promotion likelihood and position desirability. 22. Beware of buzzwords like synergy or vibe. They often indicate juvenile workplace dynamics. 23. Assess the personality and respect shown by those interviewing you. If they are narcissistic or pompous, they may be your future manager and make your experience miserable. 24. If they say, "We work hard and play hard," expect to be overworked and then pressured to join unwanted company events and games. 25. If you hear that you will be getting in on the ground floor, working at a startup, or handling a sudden large influx of business, expect chaos, disorganization, and little support or compensation for stress. 26. If the company values education over experience excessively or resists updating technology and practices, especially if they still use paper systems outside of government roles, expect outdated and inefficient procedures that may hinder your work. Use these signs to protect yourself from toxic or unprofessional workplaces. Story 4. We are like a family. They badmouth one of their current employees to you. They say you have to buy anything from them or bring your own supplies, but you will be reimbursed. They make you do work for free as part of the interview process. They get uncomfortable with any clarifying questions you have. The interviewer does not speak the same language as you. They make comments about your age or appearance. Story 5. I arrived early for an interview and the secretary said, "You are late." Upon seeing me, even though I was actually early, it seems the other person canceled. This just shows how you may be treated going forward. Story 6. During one of my interviews, as I was talking to the hiring manager, I could tell he was a little sarcastic and power-tripping. His assistant was sitting across from me and looked depressed, as if he just wanted to quit on the spot. Sometimes, the red flag is reading people's body language when the boss enters the room. Story 7. Had an interview for a sales position the other day, and they said they only hire women because women are better at sales. I am a woman, but I do not care. That is sexism and comes off as very inappropriate. Story 8. One time I asked how much I would be getting paid per hour, and the interviewer told me that they prefer applicants who do not want to come to work only for the money. Story 9. When they ask if I have any questions for them, I ask, "What do you like about working here?" If they take too long to answer or cannot name anything, it is pretty much guaranteed that I will not like working there. Story 10. We are a highly dynamic, fast-paced environment where we look for employees to take initiative. Basically, they are going to throw you into chaos without any help or proper training. We are like a family here. No, you leverage emotional blackmail to boost productivity and profits. Story 11. My favorite question to ask is, what is the biggest challenge my role can face? And what kind of support do I have access to so I can navigate those challenges? If they respond with, "Oh, there are no challenges here. It's pretty easy," that is a lie for one of two reasons. Either the interviewer knows what the problems are at the job and is lying to make the job look more attractive, or they are unaware of what the challenges are because human resources or management is so toxic that none of the employees will actually come to them for help. I had a few jobs, once a sales job that reported the pain after 2 months, answering that there are no problems. Therefore, there is no support because it's just that simple. I refused the offer. At another job, the interviewer had to stop, think for a minute before they answered, and gave me an example of a challenge and how the manager, would help in that case. Sure, it could be a made-up scenario, but to be honest, half the answers I give them are completely made up too, especially for those "tell us about a time you had a problem with a manager or customer and how you dealt with it" questions. Even a place like McDonald's has problems that an employee can face on the job. Story 12. How do you feel about working in a small work environment? That means they are trying to operate with the least number of employees possible. Unless the pay is over $20 per hour, since it is likely a hotel or motel, and that is the minimum wage for that field in Los Angeles County, do not apply unless you are ready to fight for your time off. Story 13. I interviewed for a 6-figure job, and they wanted me to commit to a 5-year contract while being paid 30% less than the average market rate. They stated that if I left before the end of the 5 years, there would be a $50,000 penalty, and I could not work at a competing business within 30 miles. I wanted to negotiate and include guaranteed annual 6% raises to outpace inflation, but they refused to budge on that. So, You want me to make you millions of dollars while you sit on your greedy ass, pay me a very low base salary, guarantee no raises, and keep me trapped in your business? I still cannot believe the recruiters tried to talk me out of walking away when I said no. Story 14. I was at a group test for a company, and the person flat out told us that we were not allowed to have personal cell phones at work. Then they said that if someone called the company to get a hold of us, they would not pass on any messages. I raised my hand and asked if, in case a loved one was in a serious car crash, they would let me know. He looked at me and said no, because I was there to work, nothing else. I stood up and started walking to the door. He asked where I was going. I told him I was leaving. He said the test had not started yet. I looked him in the eye and said that nothing is more important than family. If they would not tell me if a loved one was in a crash, then this was not a place for me. As I was walking out, a manager in the lobby asked what was going on. I told him. He got upset and asked me to please stay and said he would fix it. I said no thanks. If someone from Human Resources says the job is more important than family, I am done. So technically, I did not even have an interview, even though they called me a couple of times to come back and take the test. I told them I was not interested both times and never heard from them again. This was around 2002 or 2003. Story 15. Basically, anything that bothers you or seems unprofessional is a bad sign. However, a bad company for some people might not be bad for you at your level. It might be acceptable for you to work there and eventually outgrow it. Story 16. A lot of questions about handling interpersonal drama. 1 or 2, fine. Primary focus of interview? There is some stuff going on there that is just not worth the stress. Story 17. One of my potential employers told me I had to shave my beard as it was unprofessional. I asked, "Do I look unprofessional?" While wearing a full suit and tie, they replied, "No, you do not. It is just company culture." Bullet dodged. Story 18. When they do not want to talk about salary, company culture, or why the previous employee left the position. Story 19. When the job should not report to the chief executive officer, but it reports to the chief executive officer because he likes to be hands-on. Story 20. This may be specific to information technology, but let us contract a little side assignment. The recruiter does not have to know. Story 21. I once interviewed for office assistant, but the interview focused on my willingness and ability to make outbound sales calls. I withdrew my interest and ended the interview after clarifying that the opening I had applied for did not mention sales in the listing. Story 22. When a man who is going to be audited is doing the final interview for an internal auditor position. It was very humorous. Story 23. If they start talking about religion in your interview, consider that I applied for a job at a chicken salad chain and they said, "God is always watching you, but especially in our restaurant." Story 24. When an employee jumps off the roof of the building, that would be a significant warning sign. I do not know, though. Story 25. Yes, we offer remote work, but with difficult conditions to navigate. For example, everyone is expected to sit in a video call all day, muted but with the camera on. The person interviewing you says, "In the office, my colleagues can see me through the glass walls. To me, this feels no different." Story 26. I once answered a few questions at an interview as a record store manager. Their third question was, "When can we schedule a lie detector test?" Of course, not being an idiot and knowing that this is against state law, I jumped at the chance just for the experience. By the time it was over, they thought I was the Unabomber. Story 27. If they ask what your reliable transportation is, most states consider that illegal because unless the job specifies, you must have a car. You do not need to explain how you get to work. This usually means they will skirt the law. It is also a strong sign that they are anti-union. Story 28. I just had this in a technical interview. Key concerns were references to a fast-paced work environment, wearing many hats, pivoting priorities daily, and pushing really hard now for the benefit of later. Sounded messy. Story 29. They get your name wrong, they get your interview time wrong even though they scheduled it, they do not show up on time for your rescheduled interview, they ask during the interview which position you are applying for again, they make it obvious they are distracted doing something else on screen, and finally, all email communication is unprofessional with spelling errors and informal expressions. I turned down the second interview I was offered, and the response I received was that the team was disappointed in my decision. Story 30. If they conduct the office tour and many employees have been working there for less than a year, this often indicates that they treat employees poorly or the job is unsatisfactory. Story 31. The male interviewers did not let the female interviewer, who was literally on the same side of the table as them, get a word in. I left that situation very quickly. Story 32. I remember seeing someone recently post a picture of a no contraception contract given to them by an employer as part of a new hire packet. Story 33. When the interviewer cannot help but praise themselves, that is caustic narcissistic behavior on display. When they do not want to talk about salary or focus too much on mine. When it is a panel interview and the goal of everyone is to trip you up instead of asking genuine questions. Story 34. I interviewed for a job as general manager of a cable television company. The politically connected minority owner had been filling in as general manager. In the interview, she made it clear that there were 2 people on the staff whom she had hired, and you won't have to worry about them at all, which I interpreted as these are my flying monkeys, and if you do anything to them, you'll be fired. No thanks. The funny thing is, I went to work for the same company 2 years later in a different city, and they were the best I ever worked for. Story 35. The sales manager said that during our next interview, he wants to see my customer list and know how much business I will bring. I got up, said no thanks, and left the interview never to return. Story 36. I once showed up to an interview, and they seemed surprised I was there despite it being my scheduled time. It then took them an hour to find the person who was supposed to interview me. The secretary kept apologizing about how bad the office smelled because something had crawled into the ceiling and died, and they had not removed it yet. There were definitely some red flags at that place. Story 37. When the job turns out to be different from what was mentioned in the job advertisement. I once went to an interview for a job that would lead to a degree in carpentry after working under the supervision of a senior worker for a set time. What they actually offered was the job of monitoring a production line that made kitchen worktops from recycled plastic. I walked away. Some years later, the company was in the headlines for committing a massive environmental crime, releasing microplastics and various chemicals into nature. Story 38. We have many candidates who want this job. This implies psychological pressure. You are replaceable. Be grateful that you are being considered. This is a toxic power dynamic. Story 39. All right, one last thing. What if I told you that you could be your own boss and work from home on your own terms? All you have to do is commit to our sponsor and... Story 40. We are a family here. Expect to feel guilty, threatened, and to work well beyond the original job scope. We believe in giving 100% effort 100% of the time. You must appear to be working even if there is no task. If it is a non-emergency service, you are expected to be on call at all times. A flexible schedule means your schedule, not theirs. They refuse to discuss wages or benefits and act offended when these topics are raised. Story 41. We will start by paying you 80% of the normal wage, and after 6 months upon completion of the trial run, you will receive a full wage. Story 42. My job involved 2 separate interviews, a government background check, 2 days of orientation, and about 50 documents and tests in the company's internal system. Look at the cars of the employees in the parking lot. If you see a bunch of old, run-down vehicles, leave because the company probably is not paying their employees well. Observe the workers during the walkthrough. Do they look happy, complacent, or sad? A company will tell you what you want to hear, presenting everything as positive. Research the nationwide average salary for the position you are applying for before negotiating a starting wage or salary. Pay attention to medical benefits and other benefits offered. Many companies start employees with only a few days of vacation per year and act as if they are doing a favor. Research the company you are applying to. Is it well liked in the community? Does it have scandals? Good management can make or break a company. Treating employees with respect is crucial and directly tied to company profits. Ask other employees if the workplace has a high turnover rate and if positions are often filled with temporary workers. Just because you accepted a job does not mean you are obligated to stay. It does not take long to realize if a job is unsuitable. For example, I once applied to a pontoon building shop and realized it was essentially a sweatshop. I left immediately and found a much better, higher-paying job. Some people do not know how to distinguish a good job from a bad one because it is all they have experienced. Just because others tolerate poor conditions does not mean you have to. Story 43. The worst interview I ever had was for a management position, and they were very vague about the nature of the company. I showed up and was told my interview would be with one of the managers, and he would show me the job on the way. Confused, we exited the building, and he showed me the products he sells door to people working in business, basically bothering people at work to try to sell them perfume or other items. He said he buys the products cheaply from the company and that the profit you can get is only limited by how high a price you can convince people to pay. I said no thanks and left. Story 44. I work in sales, and twice I interviewed where they said they had to lay off their entire sales staff. I turned down the second interview both times. I have worked at small companies that had small sales teams of 3 or 4 people who quit around the same time. When your work buddy finds a better job, it inspires other team members to do the same. Story 45. The first job interview I ever had. The manager showed up 10 minutes late. I was 15 minutes early and did not have the papers organized. I was not even interviewed. It was straight to signing papers to be hired. Other employees interrupted the interview several times. There was an instance where an employee made a racially motivated joke to a coworker in front of customers, and the manager's response was, "Don't scare him away. I need this position filled." The manager had to ask me my name twice and never referenced my name to any other employee. Safe to say, I did not follow up with the training as I was supposed to, and I am not ashamed of it. The position I was hired for was not the one I applied for. The pay was significantly lower, and when I mentioned it, I was told that the application is just a general application and they fill what they need. That was not what was advertised. Story 46. If I hear dotted line, no one reports to me by a dotted line, and I do not report to anyone else by a dotted line. It is a solid line on the reporting chart or it will not work. It has no authority. I understand you want me to perform managerial tasks but do not want to compensate me as a manager. That means your organization is dysfunctional. Story 47. What position are you interviewing for? This was for a long-term acute care hospital. After I answered, they asked if it was for the Southern California hospital. I applied to one in Northern California. I said no. If they can't even get my basic application right, red flags come up immediately. Story 48. Micromanaging. Laughing my ass off. Company looking for an artist who can work independently but requires opening the camera for the whole day. Story 49. When there was no interview, my first job was obtained without a formal interview. I received a text from the boss indicating when I was to start. I was 14 years old and ended up working alone in a popular bubble tea shop in my town. It was a difficult experience. Story 50. What are your salary expectations? Please provide the salary range for the position, and we can proceed from there. I will not accept junior-level pay for senior responsibilities. Story 51. Any job trying to fill a position immediately that does not normally have high turnover and the business is not growing likely has high turnover or poor management. Story 52. This happened back in 1986. I had a job interview in the Orlando area, and the interviewer told me it was dangerous for me as a woman to drive down Interstate 4. He would not allow his 14-year-old daughter to do so. At the time, I was 24 years old and was in disbelief that he said this to me. I was not 14 but 24. I doubt he would have said this to a man, and if he did, the man would probably get up, walk out, and not return or think he was strange. I did not get the job. I felt like walking away at that point but did not, as that would have been seen as rude. Story 53. This one is for younger people. If you have to pay money out of pocket for it, it is probably not a job. If you have to pay for training or to cover the initial cost of something, it is not legitimate. It might be normal to pay for a uniform or something similar, but even that should be able to be deducted from your first paycheck. Story 54. When the interview is conducted by 4 separate hostile managers who quickly fire questions at you before you can finish answering the previous one. I would gladly answer your question once I have finished answering her question if I still thought I was interested in a position here. However, based largely on this interview process, I do not believe that is still the case. I will see myself out, thank you. True story. Story 55. I had an interview scheduled for a specific time. I arrived 10 minutes early, and there was a line of 7 people waiting for a single interviewer. One man walked out and did not seem happy about his interview. I walked right back out the door. The main issue was that I knew my time would not be respected. The disappointed man was just the icing on the cake. I also had an interview where the receptionist was unaware that an interview was scheduled. This should have alerted me to the fact that the staff were disorganized and there was a communication problem. Story 56. I learned recently about the coffee mug test. That situation would have made me leave immediately. If you offer me a drink, it is not my responsibility during or immediately after the interview at an unfamiliar place to manage the cup once it is empty, unless it is a disposable vessel that can be thrown away or taken with me. Story 57. When they made errors in all the details of your letter of employment and called you difficult for requesting amendments, you should have heeded the warning. Story 58. Any bait and switch. If you accept part-time instead of full-time, it will be 2 hours instead of 4. If you accept that, the pay will be significantly lower. Just walk out on the first switch. Story 59. I asked during an interview about the career progression options within their organization. They said the role I would be in and the roles they held were pretty much the only options. I declined from there. Story 60. They are trying to ask how you feel about doing support rotations or working weekends. If that is something you know is a problem for employees and you are not taking steps to prevent it, that is a major concern. Story 61. When they are pushing the whole "we are one big family" idea and mixing religion while trying to earn a paycheck, I am out. Find someone else who will fall for this nonsense. Story 62. We are like a family here. Some companies are like this, including mine. However, those that truly are prove it through their actions rather than just words. Story 63. I had an interview that started with a supervisor coming in hot and super cranky, saying he normally doesn't do interviews and didn't know what to ask. He got annoyed and sent in a junior person who really didn't know what to say. It was a complete waste of both our time and showed how disorganized the place was. It was a multinational bank and financial services company, but they lacked any formality or clarity in that introduction. At another place, I was immediately asked to take a test before meeting the boss. The questions included some basic math, but others were strange, like every good dog has a, with options, bone, water dish, house color. It was very weird. Finally, I had a conversation with the boss, and all he did for 45 minutes was talk endlessly about the job and what he didn't like. When the next boss walked in, he had nothing to say, to which I responded, "That's okay. I think the other guy spoke enough for both of us." He had a good laugh. I shook his hand, thanked him for his time, and wished him luck on his continued search. I did not even want to consider an offer from that place. Story 64. They rescheduled a million times. Once or even twice, I get it. But there was a recent interview I did where it seemed like forever until they confirmed a time. Story 65. If they treat me like a dumb girl just because I wear makeup and straighten my hair, thank you, older white men. I appreciate your presence. Story 66. When they say you cannot transfer to another department for years, it means it is an undesirable job and everyone wants to move to new departments. Story 67. When told you have to be a self-starter in a fast-paced environment, this is essentially an admission that the place is a total shambles. Story 68. If you are serious about a job offer, the offer itself should include specific details not just about the pay, but the benefits as well. Health insurance and retirement plans make up 25% or more of total compensation. I should not have to find out on my first day of work that you only offer exchange plans and do not provide premium support. Acting defensively when I ask for details on all types of compensation is a major red flag. Competitive is not an acceptable answer. When you make an offer on a house, does your letter say you are willing to make a competitive amount without an actual number? In any other situation, you would be seen as unserious. Candidates deserve the same level of care and respect regarding the full financial impact of what you are offering. Story 69. Depends on where you are, how much you are willing to tolerate, and how desperate you are to switch. I am in a senior role, working for 22 years now, with no particular strong reason to switch jobs. My current employer has a very strong multinational corporation culture, and we generally treat each other with a lot of courtesy and respect. Still, I recently interviewed for a senior role at one of the Big Four. Just curiosity, I guess, and the human resources person was a friend of mine. Anyway, I joined a 30-minute Microsoft Teams call. The interviewer arrived 10 minutes late with no apologies, did not introduce himself, nor did he explain the role. Instead, he jumped straight into what I believe was intended as a grilling exercise. He would not let me complete my answers and kept interrupting me with the next question before I had finished answering the previous one. His whole demeanor was as if I was lying about my role and my experience. He kept referring to me as boss. At one point he said, "Boss, you are using a lot of big words. Can you explain in ordinary language?" I was explaining a highly technical advisory project my team had done and was keeping it as simple as possible. I really felt like walking out but tolerated him out of respect for my human resources friend. After the call, I called my friend and said, "Thanks, but no thanks." For me, a basic level of courtesy and respectful professionalism is an absolute must. If he spoke to me in that manner, I shudder to think how he treats juniors. Not for me, quite happy where I am. Story 70. When they cannot even schedule the interview in the first place. I applied for a cafe job. They offered me an interview in location 1 at 3 p.m. I said I could make it. Then they asked to change the location and time to a very different area that I did not even apply for. I told them I could only make it to the first location, but they still tried to get me to go to the further one at a different time, so I just gave up. Story 71. After an interview and a trial of a couple of hours working, the boss called and said, "Well, you didn't annoy me, so the job is yours." No, thank you. That annoyed him. Story 72. The worst job of my life. After my interview, I was talking with one of my prospective coworkers, and he told me, "You do not want to work here." Story 73. Too many interviews. When they do not know how their hiring process works. I was told after a telephone interview that I could come in for a day and receive an offer afterward. However, they wanted another interview after I had already spent 8 hours with them. Do they reimburse your travel expenses? When the company benefits get worse every time you talk to someone. At a job fair, they said 4 to 5 days of remote work is normal. At the first interview, they said I have to come in twice a week, but that there are offices nearby I can use. By the end of the second interview, I was told I had to travel a couple of days every 6 months to a distant city. The same company wanted a third interview after promising an offer following the second one. When they promise you a big raise within a year if you perform well at the job, but instead they overload you with work and claim you are not good enough. Story 74. They had me fill out my application again. They told me the interviewer was unavailable, but I was welcome to wait. The human resources representative left for lunch while I was sitting on the other side of her desk, where papers were piled high. While she was gone, 2 other employees talked about how a missing person was pulled out of the lake that morning. After an hour, I was led to another room where I waited another 10 minutes. The interviewer realized she was the wrong person and kindly led me to the correct interviewer. I started my elevator speech in a hallway, only to be interrupted mid-sentence as the correct interviewer told the incorrect interviewer that the position had already been filled, and that she would not hire a new graduate anyway due to the union. I mentioned there was one other job I had applied to, and we found that interviewer who was excited to talk to me but said he could not hire a new graduate for the position I had applied to. However, the union might allow him to hire me in a separate ward he was opening for detoxifying drug addicts. I was desperate for a job. I was grateful when I got back to my car to see a missed voicemail for a job offer at another place that was much less chaotic. I received the detox job offer a week later but turned it down. Story 75. When they are very enthusiastic about how supportive they will be, what can happen is that when someone is too enthusiastic, They become too involved in your work and cannot loosen their control. They will be supportive as long as you act and do everything exactly as they think you should. As soon as you do something different or innovative, they will make your life difficult. Story 76. A lot of the time, if they call the environment a family, especially when there are more than 20 people. Story 77. Being asked to stage in a restaurant was a deal breaker for me. I know it is common, but it is unfair. I do not want to work for you for free. Other industries seem to work just fine without this process. Maybe just make sure you are hiring the right person the first time rather than making people do trial shifts for free. Story 78. We are family here, so they fully intend to demand loyalty such as unpaid hours, poor conditions, inhumanly high work pace, and excessive demands, but with all of that loyalty being a one-way street. Story 79. The phrases, we are like family, and we work hard, we play hard. Either of those run. They will want you to work overtime for free. Story 80. If people say that some individuals cannot handle work or that if you are told to do something, you need to do it quickly and perfectly. Story 81. This is an independent contractor position. Unless I am calling the shots and making enough to cover insurance and bonding, I usually pass on these opportunities. Don't get me wrong, if it is paying $60 an hour and up, we can discuss 1099 gigs for sure, but most only want to pay you without helping with your tax burden. Story 82. We are a team. In other words, you are poorly managed, most of your employees are incompetent, and you have 2 or 3 star players who carry the workload for everyone else. Story 83. Family generally means they expect you to contribute financially as if you were receiving an inheritance from the arrangement. Story 84. When they say, we are like a family here, run. That means no boundaries, unpaid overtime, and drama you did not sign up for. Story 85. If the person interviewing you is male and has clumps of hair at the side and is completely clean-shaven on top, this is a red flag. He is either inappropriate or a terrible boss. See you later. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.